Good afternoon, APUSH, and welcome to the official broadcast of the 2023 National President's League Draft. Today, the 22 teams of the NPL will draft their star of the future in hopes that one day they will lead the franchise to a Heimler Bowl victory. Before we get started today, I'd like to remind everybody that the Philadelphia Benjamins hold the first pick and are projected to select Abraham Lincoln from Illinois according to the C-SPAN mock draft. And I've just received word that the Philadelphia Benjamins clock is about to start. Without further ado, welcome to Draft Day 2023. Oh, and I completely forgot to introduce my partner for today, Joe Biden. Say hi, Joe.
What's up, everyone? It's me, Joe Biden.
And Joe, I think the first pick is clear. It's definitely Abraham Lincoln. But as with every draft, surprises always come, and with the pick being in now, we will see who they picked. With the first pick in the 2023 NPL draft, the Philadelphia Benjamins select Franklin D. Roosevelt, Democrat, New York.
Oh, wow. I feel like I'm going to throw up.
And, Roosevelt clearly surprised with Philly's decision to pick him number one overall. This was not expected coming into the draft, but I don't think the pick is terrible. In college, FDR fought a depression and a world war, and, can you really deal with worse? And it's not like he did a bad job at either one of them. In fact, you could argue he did a fantastic job. This is a pick I actually really like from Philly, but the one stain on FDR is the fact that he put Japanese Americans in internment camps. I think for Philly, though, they're looking for a guy with incredible resilience and persistence, and they will get that with FDR. With the second pick, the Jamestown OGs are now on the clock, and the expected pick here is Abraham Lincoln from Illinois. He was projected to go first overall, but the Benjamins passed on him to take Franklin Roosevelt. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here if they take Lincoln or if they take Washington. Maybe they even take Theodore Roosevelt. What do you think, Joe?
I have to agree with you. I think Abraham Lincoln is the pick for Jamestown. Lincoln is such an important president, and without him, the United States would be a vastly different country. Jamestown is the oldest team in the NPL, and they ought to know what they're doing here. If they don't pick Lincoln, I'm not sure what I'd do if I were a fan of them.
And, Joe, that's probably right. I wouldn't be a fan of the team either if they messed up something like that. And it looks like the pick is in, so we will see who they pick shortly.
With the second pick in the NPL draft, the Jamestown OGs select Abraham Lincoln, Republican, from Illinois.
Lincoln is the expected pick here, and I think Jamestown nailed it. In college, Lincoln not only fought a civil war and won, but he did what no president before him dare do: free the slaves. Lincoln delivered the Enlightenment ideas the United States is built upon to slaves in the South, which is a right they should have had since 1776. Lincoln did get injured at the start of his second season at Ford's Theater and is currently recovering, but I don't think his injury will prevent him from helping lead the Jamestown OGs to a bright future. Amazing pick from Jamestown.
Up next, we have my favorite team in the NPL, the Yorktown Independents. The pick here is definitely George Washington. If they don't pick G-Dub, I'm going to put the pointy end of 2 ice cream cones into my nostrils. It would drive me insane. They better pick Washington. What do you think, Aiden?
Yes, I agree with you, Joe. I think George Washington is the best pick here. I wouldn't go as far as to put two ice cream cones in my nostrils, but I mean, you do you, Joe. It is your favorite team. I'm going to agree with you though. George Washington is the pick for the Yorktown Independents. It makes the most sense for them. And it looks like the pick is in, so let's see who they selected.
With the third pick in the NPL draft, the Yorktown Independents drafts George Washington, non-affiliated, from Virginia.
Thank God they picked Washington. If they didn't pick him, I might as well be a dead man. George Washington is a guy you want to lead your franchise to a Heimler Bowl. Not only did Washington lead one of the biggest upsets in history by defeating the British in the national championship, he also set the base plate for what it means to be a president. And to give him even more points, he made sure that the number one priority during his presidency was improving the domestic facets of the United States. Washington was incredibly smart to make sure the United States did not get involved in foreign affairs. Great pick from Yorktown.
With the fourth pick, the Antietam Emancipators are in a pretty weird situation. They need a guy who can do something, but they are also in a great position to trade down, which is exactly what I think they are going to do. If the clock hits 0 and they have not traded down, though, I think they're selecting Theodore Roosevelt from New York. TR is a guy who will get things done, and that is exactly what the Emancipators need. I have just received word that the Antietam Emancipators are trading the fourth pick to the Muckrakers for the 10th pick and the 2023 Heimler's History AP US History Review Guide. I think this is a bit of an overpay. The APUSH Review Guide is extremely valuable, but I'm excited to see what the Muckrakers decide to do at number 4.
With the fourth pick in the 2023 NPL draft, the Muckrakers select Theodore Roosevelt, Republican, New York.
Amazing pick by the Muckrakers. I think they might have overpaid, but nonetheless, great selection at number 4. Theodore Roosevelt is a guy who will get things done for them. In college, TR single-handedly ended the era of mass corruption known as the Gilded Age and helped start the Progressive Era, which benefited the common man to a great extent. TR's highlight on his resume, however, is the square deal. He helped labor fight back against big business, helped protect consumers across the country, and helped build national identity by conserving natural resources, which eventually led to the creation of national parks. Great selection by the Muckrakers. On the clock at number 5 is the Chesapeake Tobacco, and I think this is where the draft really starts. The Tobacco could go a few ways here. They could pick Kennedy, they could pick Eisenhower, they could pick Harry Truman, they could take, honestly, anybody in the top 10, and it would be a fine selection. But I'm not sure what they're going to do here. It could be a very, very interesting choice for the Tobacco at number 6.
I've just been told by one of my sources that Chesapeake is trading the 5th pick and the 27th pick to the East Siders for 3 draft picks and Harold Castro. Crazy deal that the East Siders were able to pull off.
This is an absolute robbery by the East Siders. Harold Castro is not a good asset. I don't know why the Tobacco want him. Maybe they just don't like anybody that's at number 5, but the pick is in now, so we're going to see who the East Siders decide to select.
before I make the first round selection for the East Siders, I'd like to send a shout out to all those people who grew up at 12 Mile and DeQuinder. I love you all, and I'm one of you, and I always will be. Now, with the 5th pick in the NPL draft, the East Siders proudly select, oh, there it is. It's going to change the franchise. Harry S. Truman, Democrat, Missouri. Thank you.
Questionable choice to select Truman at 5 after trading up, knowing you could have grabbed him at 6, 7, or even 8, but I think Truman is still good at 5. He ended World War II by dropping 2 little boys on the city of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and then signed the Marshall Plan into effect to help rebuild European countries ravaged by World War II. Furthermore, he issued the Truman Doctrine, which stated that communism must be contained, and he desegregated the military. All in all, Truman is a man of the people and is a good choice at number 5. I just finished editing the first 15 picks of the draft, and I just realized that Thomas Jefferson wasn't even on my draft board. So I'm honorarily selecting him at number 6 because that's where I would have selected him were he on my draft board and I didn't forget about him. I'm really sorry to all the Thomas Jefferson fans out there. I'm sorry to Timor for forgetting about Thomas Jefferson, but Thomas Jefferson would be my 6th pick because he expanded the role of the federal government, even though he was a JDR. And buying Louisiana was one of the best things he could have done as president, even though it went against his JDR views. And same with the Lewis and Clark expedition that opened up exploring the Northwest and led to things such as the Oregon Trail. Anyways, I just want to apologize for forgetting such an important president in my draft. I really don't know what to say. I don't know how I forgot this, but my toes are in too deep to go back and change everything, so I'm just going to honorarily select Thomas Jefferson at number 6. At number 6 is the Boston Tea Partiers, and I think they're going to go one of two ways here, Kennedy or Eisenhower. These are two guys that will be good either way, but I have word that the Boston Tea Partiers are looking at one guy and one guy specifically, and it looks like they've already turned in their draft pick, so they must be very confident about the guy they are going to select.
The 6th pick in the MPL draft. The Boston Tea Partiers select John F. Kennedy, Democrat, Texas.
Kennedy at 6 is an interesting choice by the Boston Tea Partiers. I think it's great, though. Kennedy was from the Boston area, and thus Boston is kind of selecting their hometown hero here. Not only that, but Kennedy sought to expand civil rights legislation and pushed civil rights legislation forth. Kennedy also played a vital role in the space race. Without Kennedy, we may not have made it to the moon. Kennedy's reaction to the Cuban Missile Crisis was very successful. However, the Bay of Pigs invasion led by Kennedy was not. Overall, though, I think Kennedy is a good choice at number 6. At number 7, we have the Sutter's Mill Rushers, the place where the gold rush started. Fittingly, the Sutter's Mill Rushers have struck gold here as Eisenhower has fallen to them at number 7. Will they take Eisenhower? I'm not sure, but I think they should. With the 7th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Sutter's Mill Rushers select Dwight D. Eisenhower, Republican, Texas. This is the pick you definitely want to see at number 7 by Sutter's Mill. They nailed it. Eisenhower's chief achievement during his presidency was the Interstate Highway Act, which created the interstate highway systems we see in the United States today. For example, I-75 is one of the highways created by the Interstate Highway Act. These interstates would cause the suburbs to be created, which is a huge part of American national identity. Furthermore, during his presidency, the landmark Supreme Court decision Brown versus the Board of Education was handed down, and Eisenhower made sure that the court's decision was enforced by using federal troops. Great decision by Sutter's Mill at number 7. Eisenhower is probably the steal of the draft so far. At number 8, the Saratoga Turning Points are projected to select Ronald Reagan from California, but I think they may go a different way. I think Saratoga may lean more towards Barack Obama or Lyndon B. Johnson here. However, I am not entirely sure, so let's ask our good friend Joseph Biden what he thinks on the situation. Joe?
I think they should take my good friend Barack Obama at number 8. I may be a little biased because I was Obama's VP, but bias aside, I feel that Barack Obama is the best candidate on the board to be selected at number 8.
Thank you, Joe. And it seems the pick is in, so let's see. With the 8th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Saratoga Turning Point select Barack Hussein Obama, Democrat, Illinois. Obama's personally not who I would have selected here, but Joe Biden was right. Obama is the pick. Barack Obama ran on a very progressive platform, and his actions reflect that. He signed the Affordable Care Act into law, which guaranteed Americans health care. He also ended the Great Recession with the Recovery Act of 2009. And last but not least, during Obama's presidency, Osama bin Laden was found and killed in Pakistan. Overall, I think this is a good selection at number 8 for Saratoga, and they are getting a great leader in Barack Obama.
Picking 11th are the Gettysburg Addressers. I think the pick is definitely Ronald Reagan. He's clearly the best available on the board. If Gettysburg doesn't pick Reagan, they're making a huge mistake.
You know, I got to agree with you, Joe. I think Ronald Reagan's definitely the pick here. And the mock draft, C-SPAN's mock draft, says Ronald Reagan is the pick here as well. Ronald Reagan was projected to go 8th, but he has now fallen to 9, and I think the Gettysburg Addressers have gotten a treasure that has fallen into their lap. And the pick is now in, so we will see who they decide to select. Hopefully Reagan, but possibly somebody else.
With the 9th pick in the NPL draft, the Gettysburg Addressers select James Monroe, JDR, Virginia.
Wow, this is very unexpected. James Monroe is the pick for the Gettysburg Addressers. This is crazy. I like the pick, though. It's bold. James Monroe is a bold pick at number 9. Monroe is perhaps best remembered by the Monroe Doctrine, which stated that the Western Hemisphere is closed to European colonization. Monroe was basically saying, hey, we're the big dogs now. You stay out of here. And you know, it worked very well. Europeans did not mess with the Western Hemisphere after the Monroe Doctrine was initiated. Monroe is also the president who acquired Florida from Spain, and he also patched up some relations with the British. Overall, I believe that this is a solid pick, but I think Reagan is the better selection here. Okay, now on the clock, the Antietam Emancipators. This pick was originally held by the Muckrakers, but they traded up to select Theodore Roosevelt at number 4. Again, I think Ronald Reagan is the best choice on the board, but an alternative is Lyndon B. Johnson. LBJ is still on the board, and he could be a good pick at number 10. Another possible option is Woodrow Wilson. He is still available. We could see Woodrow Wilson at number 10, but if they don't pick Reagan, this could be a huge mistake. Reagan's still available. He slipped down 2 draft spots. I think we see Ronald Reagan here.
With the 10th pick in the NPL draft, the Antietam Emancipators select Woodrow Wilson, Democrat from Virginia.
Wow, and we see Woodrow Wilson go number 10th overall. I think this is a fine pick, but Ronald Reagan is still available, so it's just such a blunder in my opinion. However, Wilson is a good choice. Wilson was an economic progressive attacking what he called the triple wall of privilege: banks, the tariff, and trusts. Under Wilson, we also got the graduated income tax, the 16th Amendment. Wilson also held office during World War I, and after the Entente won World War I, Wilson attempted to set up a League of Nations, which worked. However, the League of Nations ultimately failed because the United States returned to an isolationist policy following World War I. Overall, I think this is a fine selection by Antietam at number 10. And with that, day 1 of the draft is complete. Tomorrow, day 2, we will see picks 11 through 22 completing the first round. Now let's review the day 1 recap. First pick went to Philadelphia. They selected Franklin Roosevelt. Second pick, Jamestown selected Lincoln. Third pick, Yorktown selected George Washington. Fourth pick, the Muckrakers selected Theodore Roosevelt. With the fifth pick, the Eastsiders picked Harry Truman. 6, Boston took JFK. 7, Sutter's Mill took Eisenhower. 8, Saratoga took Obama. 9, Gettysburg took Monroe. And 10, Antietam took Wilson. Notable prospects still on the board include people such as Ronald Reagan, Lyndon B. Johnson, and William McKinley. I'm excited to see what happens on day 2. Good afternoon, APUSH, and welcome to day 2 of the 2022 National President's League Draft. I'm Aiden Nuttall, joined by sitting President Joseph R. Biden Jr. Biden is not eligible for the draft because he has not finished his term yet, so instead, he's commentating with me. On the clock, picking 11th are the Utah Mormons. Joe, who do you think the Mormons are going to select?
I think the Mormons are going to pick Ronald Reagan. Mormons are known to be very conservative, and Ronald Reagan is one of the most conservative presidents in the history of our country. I think any other candidate is off the books. The pick is definitely Ronald Reagan.
With the 11th pick in the NPL draft, the Utah Mormons select Lyndon B. Johnson, Democrat, Texas.
Well, it seems that Joe Biden was wrong. The Utah Mormons select Lyndon B. Johnson at number 11. Lyndon B. Johnson took office after John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. The two things that Johnson is known for, which makes him so high on this draft board, is his Great Society and the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1965, which ended segregation in the United States. The other part of Johnson's presidency he is remembered for is the Great Society. The Great Society was a program which sought to eliminate poverty from the United States. This was done using Medicare healthcare for the old and Medicaid healthcare for the poor. However, Johnson falls down so low because of his reaction to the Vietnam War. Johnson escalated the Vietnam War, and by every year that passed, he sent almost twice the amount of troops he did the year prior. The result was about 50,000 troops in Vietnam by the end of his presidency. Overall, though, I think Lyndon B. Johnson is a very good pick at 11. Picking 12th are the Plymouth Pilgrims. They're in an interesting position here. Ronald Reagan is still available on the board, and I think he should be the selection here. Reagan has slipped too far, and I think now is the perfect time for the Pilgrims to grab him at number 12 and get the steal of the draft.
With the 12th pick in the NPL draft, the Plymouth Pilgrims select William McKinley, Republican from Ohio.
The pick turns out to be William McKinley. Interesting selection by the Pilgrims. I don't think this is the best choice. However, William McKinley is still a good choice at number 12. William McKinley is perhaps best known for getting the United States involved in the Spanish-American War. Although McKinley did not want to get involved in a war with Spain, he did it anyway, and the result was the United States' sphere of influence increased greatly. Overall, good pick by the Pilgrims at 12, as William McKinley is a guy who will give the Pilgrims a lot more influence in the NPL. Good choice. Up next are the Oregon Trailheads. I think they should take Ronald Reagan yet again. However, that may possibly not be the case. It's interesting to see how Reagan has fallen down this far. I think Reagan should be the pick here, but I could also see that something like James Madison or Bill Clinton going here, maybe even some John Adams action. We'll see. With the 13th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Oregon Trailheads select James Madison, JDR, Virginia. James Madison is the pick at 13 for the Oregon Trailheads. I think it's a fine selection. Reagan would have been better here, but I think Oregon is doing a good job by picking James Madison. Madison doesn't get as high as a rap as his fellow early compadres George Washington and Thomas Jefferson because he was president during the War of 1812, when really in the early stages of the country we should not have been getting involved in wars like that because the main focus was to improve the internal aspects of the country. However, the United States won the War of 1812, or so its citizens thought, and this would lead to the era of good feelings after the Hartford Convention. So, because of that, James Madison kind of gets a boost in his standings. Overall, I think this is a fine selection. Picking 14th are the Missouri Compromisers, and I feel as if they might select Bill Clinton rather than Ronald Reagan because of Missouri's close proximity to Arkansas. You always want to select the hometown hero.
With the 14th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Missouri Compromisers select Bill Clinton, Democrat, Arkansas.
So the Compromisers actually do select Bill Clinton, and I think it's a fine pick. Clinton is infamous for his impeachment, which likely factored into him dropping to 13, but apart from his impeachment, Clinton was a pretty solid guy. He was great domestically, and he presided over a booming economy, and he helped it boom even more after signing the North American Free Trade Agreement. Clinton also had a very progressive plan for healthcare reform, but he failed to pass it. Clinton, he also got the debt under control, and the government actually had a surplus for the first time since 1969. He was also responsible for NATO expansion in the 90s. Overall, I think Missouri picking up Clinton at 13 is a great choice.
Selecting 15th are the Virginia Washingtons. I believe now is finally the time for Ronald Reagan to be selected. I could see the Washingtons going one other way, but it would be very foolish.
I totally agree with you, Joe. I know we've been wrong many times, but I think now is finally when Ronald Reagan will be selected. With the 15th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Virginia Washingtons select John Adams, Federalist, Virginia. Another surprising pick in the draft. John Adams was the second man to run the country, but he's not looked on as favorably as his predecessor George Washington. Adams was perhaps best known for the passing of the unconstitutional Alien and Sedition Acts and his handling of the XYZ affair. Were Adams to declare war on France after the XYZ affair, he would have dropped several spots in this draft, but his decision to stay neutral saves him. This is a decent selection by the Washingtons. Alright, I know I have said several times now that Ronald Reagan will go. I said pick 8, pick 9, pick 10, so on. I think now is finally the time Ronald Reagan gets drafted. There are simply no other good choices on the draft board. If the Atomics don't pick him, I really don't know what I'm going to say.
With the 16th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Las Vegas Atomics select Ronald Reagan, Republican, California.
Okay, Ronald Reagan is finally picked up at 16 by the Atomics, and they've just nabbed themselves the steal of the draft. I think Reagan falls down so far because he did nothing about the drug problems of the inner cities, and the national debt skyrocketed under him. However, Reagan's military spending did cause the fall of the Soviet Union, and his trickle-down economics were successful in raising the average income of American citizens. Reagan also solved the issue of drunk driving by raising the drinking age to 21. Great pick by the Atomics at 16. Okay, now at 17 we have the Chesapeake Tobacco. Remember, they traded down from the 5th pick, and they were utterly robbed by taking on Harold Castro. I really don't think there's a pick here that can redeem them from such tomfoolery, and I already know their pick is going to be bad. This is a poverty franchise. No, just no.
With the 17th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Chesapeake Tobacco select James K. Pilk, Democrat, Tennessee.
I'm actually very surprised at the decision to take Polk 17 by the Tobacco. I think Polk is the best choice here. I'm surprised that the Tobacco were able to recognize that. I'm out of words here. I'm so shocked. Polk's main goal was to acquire California from Mexico, and he did just that. He didn't really run on anything else other than that. Polk, to get California, he stationed troops in the contested border area with Mexico on the Rio Grande, and after Mexican troops attacked, Polk asked Congress for a declaration of war, which he soon received. The ensuing war was a butt-whooping, and Polk was able to acquire California easily. Great pickup at 17. Polks will definitely get things done for the Tobacco. Up next are the Chicago Capones, and I really don't see anything that they could do here. It's not very easy to trade up from 19, especially seeing that all the draft picks have occurred already, and who is really left for them to pick? John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, Ulysses S. Grant. These aren't very, they're not very eye-popping candidates. I don't know what they should do here. With the 18th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Chicago Capones select John Quincy Adams, JDR, Massachusetts. Chicago selects John Quincy Adams at 18, and I really don't like this pick. Adams won the corrupt bargain of 1824, and he appointed Henry Clay as his Secretary of State. Accordingly, Clay had much influence, and thus Adams pushed the American system forth. He then ran for re-election in 1828 and sort of caused a party split after running for re-election, and the Democratic-Republican split between John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. Adams lost the election, and instead of retiring, he became a representative so he could be humbled further in the field of politics. Adams ultimately goes here because of the American system, but there's not many positives here. Very mid-selection. At 19, the Lexington Minutemen really have two choices here, Andrew Jackson and Ulysses S. Grant. Everything else is kind of a bad pick here. They're in a tough spot, man. These aren't two great picks, but they're two picks that they're stuck making. With the 19th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Lexington Minutemen select Ulysses S. Grant, Republican, Ohio. Lexington fittingly decides to go with Ulysses S. Grant, one of the greatest war generals of United States history. Grant was the first elected president after the Civil War and the first forgettable president of the Gilded Age. Grant himself was not corrupt, but nearly everyone else around him was. His presidency was remembered for many scandals and the Panic of 1873. Unlike other Gilded Age presidents, however, Grant attempted to do something about the corruption, prosecuting the whiskey and gold rings. Overall, Grant was pretty mid, but less mid than other presidents, which puts him at 19. At pick number 20, I think the New York Tweeds are going to go ahead and select Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson's a very polarizing guy, but he is a guy who will get things done for you. Andrew Jackson kind of just ignored people to get things done. So I think that's exactly what the Tweeds are looking for, and Andrew Jackson will be the pick for them.
With the 20th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the New York Tweeds select Andrew Jackson, Democrat, Tennessee.
Jackson is probably the most controversial president, so I think it makes a lot of sense that he goes number 20. Jackson got the common man involved in politics, and he expanded the power of the presidency, most famously in the nullification crisis, and he got rid of the national debt. However, Jackson's Indian Removal Act was one of the most foul laws in history, and he ignored the checks and balances of the Supreme Court after the court struck it down and continued with his plan anyway. Jackson's termination of the bank was also one of his crowning failures as it caused the Panic of 1837. Overall, I think this is a fine selection at number 20 because there's not really anybody else here. Picking 21st are the Heimler Bowl runner-ups, the Louisiana Purchases. I think here the choice is clear. William Howard Taft from Ohio. He is simply the best candidate available on the board in my opinion. With the 21st pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Louisiana Purchases select, oh boy, George H.W. Bush, Republican, Texas. I think Taft was a better pick, but George H.W. Bush works too. Bush acted very similarly to Ronald Reagan, but he was not looked upon as favorably and he lost re-election. Bush did play a key role in the reunification of Germany, and he did help negotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement, but it was not signed until after he was out of office. Bush was also president during the Gulf War and the invasion of Panama, neither of which are looked upon very favorably in the present day. However, Bush is probably known best for this promise that he did not keep.
Read my lips.
Ultimately, Bush's failure to keep his promise of no new taxes, the Gulf War, and his reunification of Germany is what puts him at 21. Pretty mid. He did some good things, but mostly mid. With the final pick of the first round, the Washington Monuments, the defending Heimler Bowl champions. I think here they go for William Howard Taft. He's the best available. Taft also just makes the most sense for the Monuments. With the 22nd pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Washington Monuments select William Howard Taft, Republican, Ohio. This is a very expected draft pick here. William Howard Taft just makes a lot of sense for the Monuments. Many people call Theodore Roosevelt the trust buster, but the real trust buster was Taft. One of his crowning achievements was that he busted a lot of trusts, the most trusts of any president ever. However, this isn't necessarily seen as good because some trusts like Standard Oil were actually viewed as okay trusts by Theodore Roosevelt. Taft's dollar diplomacy was also another key part of his presidency. The dollar diplomacy was basically U.S. investment in foreign countries to gain influence there. Overall, though, Taft did not get too much done as president. Taft's presidency is mostly just remembered with conflict over Theodore Roosevelt for what would be best for the country, and that's why he drops to 22. And with that, Day 2 of the 2023 NPL Draft has concluded. Welcome to the third and final day of the 2023 NPL Draft. Today, each team will get about 10 seconds to make their draft selections, which is, good enough amount of time considering the prospects left on the board. Shouldn't be too hard to make a decision if you know what I mean. But yeah, I'm excited, and without wasting any time, let's get right into it.
With the 23rd pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Philadelphia Benjamins select Calvin Coolidge, Republican, Massachusetts.
Definitely the pick you want to see here for the Philadelphia Benjamins. Coolidge was president for most of the Roaring Twenties, and not much went wrong for him. He signed the Indian Citizenship Act in 1924, which gave citizenship to all Native Americans, a huge step forward for civil rights in the U.S., and he was also an advocate for racial equality in a time where racial tensions were pretty high. However, Coolidge failed to really do anything with the economic boom of the Roaring Twenties, and many people argue that some of his policies contributed to the Great Depression. A very progressive man socially, but a very conservative man fiscally. Coolidge overall was pretty mid, but on the better side of mid.
With the 24th pick in the MPL Draft, the Jamestown OGs select Gerald Ford, Republican, Michigan.
I think Gerald Ford is a fine pick at 24. Again, he's pretty mid, but I mean, what can you really do in the middle rounds of the draft? Ford assumed the presidency after Nixon resigned from office and then immediately granted Nixon a pardon, a decision which many people argue over whether it was right to do. He did bring honor back to the presidency, but other than that, he really didn't do much. U.S. involvement in Vietnam ended during Ford's term, and he helped move the Cold War into détente, but he didn't do much other than that. Ford, again, was pretty mid. With the 25th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Yorktown Independents select James Garfield, Republican, Ohio. I think James Garfield is a good pick at 25. Garfield was the man who was going to end the corruption of the Gilded Age, and he probably would have were he not assassinated. Garfield advocated for civil rights, something unheard of for Gilded Age presidents, and he also advocated for civil service reform and an educated electorate. He purged corruption in the post office system and likely would have purged corruption in other areas if he was not assassinated. I think Garfield's short tenure in office is the reason he dropped so low, but were Garfield to carry out his policies, I see him as a borderline top 15 pick. I think this is a good pick by Yorktown. With the 26th pick in the MPL Draft, the Antietam Emancipators select Chester A. Arthur, Republican, New York. Arthur fittingly goes right after James Garfield. Arthur was James Garfield's president, and Chet Arthur really didn't do much during his presidency. He did sign the Pendleton Act, which eliminated the spoils system and instead became a merit-based system, but other than that, Chester did not do much. He was very similar to other Gilded Age presidents and signed tariff and immigration bills. However, the Pendleton Act was a very important act, and that's probably the sole reason why Antietam picked him here. With the 27th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Eastsiders select Jimmy Carter, Democrat, Georgia. This definitely was not an easy pick for the Eastsiders. There's not much left on the board. Jimmy Carter was a very unlucky man. He granted amnesty to all Vietnam draft evaders, which was a good thing, and he established the Department of Education and the Department of Energy, and he helped sign an agreement with the Soviet Union to produce less weapons of mass destruction. However, like I mentioned earlier, Carter was extremely unlucky, and the end of his presidency came with an energy crisis and the Iranian hostage crisis. Carter also ended détente with the Soviets, undoing the process made by Ford and escalating the Cold War. Carter is another very mid president, and he likely slides further down the draft board, but Carter's contribution to the country and the world in his post-presidency move him up a few spots. Overall, pretty mid president, but I like the pick. With the 28th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Boston Tea Partiers select Grover Cleveland, first term, Democrat, New York. So the Tea Partiers decide to go with Cleveland here. Cleveland was the only Democrat to be president in the Gilded Age, but he acted very similarly to other presidents of the Gilded Age. He accepted France's gift to America, that being the Statue of Liberty, which greatly increased national pride and contributed to national identity. Cleveland also established the Department of Labor as president. However, Cleveland also made a plethora of bad decisions in his first term. He signed the Chinese Exclusion Act, closing the country to Chinese immigrants, and he also signed the Dawes Act, which attempted to force Native Americans to assimilate into white culture. Grover's first term was better than the second, but he wasn't great in his first term. I don't know if I like this pick, but what do you really do here? With the 29th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Sutter's Mill Rushers select George W. Bush, Republican, Texas. Sutter's Mill decides to go with George Bush here, and I think it's the correct pick. The next best guy on the board is Nixon, and I think we can all agree that George Bush is better than Nixon. Bush was immediately tested 8 months into his presidency with 9/11, and he started the war on terror. He invaded Afghanistan to overthrow the Taliban, destroy al-Qaeda, and capture its leader, Osama bin Laden. Bush also invaded Iraq on suspicions that they possessed weapons of mass destruction, but they in fact did not. Bush also signed the Patriot Act to help combat terrorism. His handling of Hurricane Katrina was awful and led to thousands dying, and in 2007 he decided to send a surge of troops to Iraq, even though weapons of mass destruction were still nowhere to be seen. In December 2007, the country entered the Great Recession, and Bush failed to stop it in his final year of office. Overall, Bush's presidency was highlighted by a lot of bad decisions and failures, which is why he goes number 29. With the 30th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Saratoga Turning Point select Richard M. Nixon, Republican, California. Saratoga decides to go in the direction of drafting Richard Nixon at 30, which I think is fine. Before we get to the elephant in the room, let's highlight Nixon's positives during his terms, which is probably why he is able to be drafted at 30. Without his positives, he would drop pretty low. Nixon ended American involvement in the combat aspects of the Vietnam War, and Ford would go on to completely end involvement in Vietnam 100%. And Nixon also ended the draft for the Vietnam War in 1973. Nixon also signed the anti-ballistic missile treaty with the Soviet Union, which was a good thing. And he also established the Environmental Protection Agency. However, Nixon's corruptness really showed when he was exposed for the Watergate scandal, a situation in which members of the Nixon administration busted into Watergate, the Democrat Party's headquarters, to look for information. And yeah, as you can imagine, it didn't really go well for Nixon, and that's probably why he is drafted at 30. With the 31st pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Gettysburg Addressers select Benjamin Harrison, Republican, Indiana. Okay, now I know this probably isn't the best thing for me to say as the commentator, but who? Just let me real quick look up who this guy is. So it seems that Benjamin Harrison is in fact one of the presidents of the United States, and he defeated Grover Cleveland in 1888. Okay, yeah, man. It seems that Harrison did stuff like other Gilded Age presidents, like sign tariffs. Whoa, and he signed the Sherman Antitrust Act. That's an important act right there. And that's probably why he is picked at 31. Other than that, I don't know who this guy is. I really never heard of him until they decided to draft him. Who is this? I don't know. With the 32nd pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Muckrakers select Rutherford B. Hayes, Republican, Ohio. I don't know if he's... and it seems as we get into the later rounds, the commissioner is getting really confused at who these guys are. I mean, I don't really blame him. Yeah, it's tough, man. It really is. I think Rutherford B. Hayes is a good pick here. I think he is probably the best available. I really don't like anything Rutherford B. Hayes did in his presidency. First of all, he was elected on a agreement that Reconstruction would end, which thus meant that African Americans in the South no longer had any protection from the racist governments of the South and the racist people of the South. So yeah, that's pretty bad. Another defining event of Rutherford B. Hayes' presidency was the Great Railroad Strike of 1877, and he set a very dangerous precedent by calling in the U.S. Army to put down the strike. Yeah, he called in the U.S. Army to put down a labor strike. Very, very dangerous. However, Hayes did implement civil service reforms, which laid groundwork for further reforms. So, overall, I think this is a fine selection. I mean, really, you can't do anything here. I feel bad for these teams down here. They don't know what to do. With the 33rd pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Utah Mormons select Martin Van Buren, Democrat, New York. Martin Van Buren, Andrew Jackson's vice president, a man you expect great things from, but at best he's mid. Martin Van Buren is best remembered for the Panic of 1837, which was not his fault. It was caused by Andrew Jackson. However, as goes with everything, the president who is in office when a specific thing happens, it is their fault. That is what the people say, even though it may not be true. So Martin Van Buren, he got a little unlucky, but he was still pretty bad. And Van Buren refused to admit Texas to the Union as a slave state during his presidency. And as everybody knows, we all love Texas, don't we? I mean, we all want Texas in the Union, but Martin Van Buren, no, he did not. Martin Van Buren really did not do anything good as president, to put it shortly, which I think is why he is selected at number 33. With the 34th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Plymouth Pilgrims select Zachary Taylor, Whig, Kentucky. This is another guy who, seriously, I have no idea who this guy is. Who are these people? Where are they coming from? No, for this one I'm just playing around. Zachary Taylor, everyone knows who he is, of course. He was a war general in the Mexican American War. You know, back in the 1850s, it was very popular to run a awesome, really cool war general with a really bad haircut, and he often won the presidency. It worked. Andrew Jackson did it. He won. Anyway, Zachary Taylor was in office for about a year, and he really did not do much. He mostly just ignored Congress and his cabinet, and yeah. Not to mention that very insane sectional tensions were going on at the time, and Zachary Taylor, he was just like, meh, that's alright. I'm president. I don't need to worry about all that stuff. I'm the president. Presidents just, they sit in the Oval Office all day, and yeah, that's really all they do. That's obviously a joke. Zachary Taylor, we love you if you're listening. Uh, Zachary Taylor, he actually did address the sectional tensions, mostly just to make sure that they didn't get worse. And by that, he just told all the settlers in New Mexico and California to just bypass the territorial stage and just become a state instantly. And yeah, and then he died. So that was pretty much his whole presidency. He didn't really do much. I don't know. I feel bad for these teams down here, man. They really don't know what to do. I'm failing you guys as a commentator, really. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. With the 35th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Oregon Trailheads select Herbert Hoover, Republican, Iowa. Ah, good old Herbert Hoover. Now, this is a guy we all love. Just kidding, Herbert Hoover, we don't like him. Because you want to know what Herbert Hoover did? During the Great Depression, Herbert Hoover, instead of trying to help the people, Hoover said, let's try trickle-down economics, and it'll work. It didn't work. He I don't know what he thought he was doing, but it didn't work. It failed everybody. Everyone was poor, and Hoovervilles happened. Not to mention, Hoover also blamed Mexican Americans for the Depression, and then he forcibly relocated them all to Mexico. So, yeah, Hoover, he was a really nice guy. He started ethnic cleansing in the United States, which is, yeah, you know, something that's happened before. He must have looked up to Andrew Jackson, if I had to guess. But, yeah, Herbert Hoover, not a very good guy, but he is the hometown hero for Oregon. He grew up there after he turned 10 years old. So, yeah, Hoover was also a Quaker, if that matters. It really doesn't, but I'm just talking to myself at this point because there's so little to say about all these awful presidents other than they suck. And it really sucks to talk about them. With the 36th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Missouri Compromisers select Warren G. Harding, Republican, Ohio. This is yet another man who I have absolutely no idea who he is. He was president for the first 2 years of the 1920s, so obviously he was getting it down in those jazz parties like Gatsby. Maybe. We don't know. He could have. Warren G. Harding is probably best known for appointing Andrew Mellon as treasurer, and Andrew Mellon is the second most remembered treasurer of all time. And Warren G. Harding was one of the most popular presidents of all time. And Harding ran on a return to normalcy platform, and he was able to win the election easily. But other than that, I mean, Warren Harding didn't really do anything. He kind of was just president during the 20s, and yeah, he. I don't know. What does he do? What does he even do? I don't know. No one knows. With the 37th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Virginia Washingtons select Millard Fillmore, Whig, New York. Again, this is another guy who I have absolutely no freaking idea who he is. He does look pretty racist, though. Let me just do a fact check on that real quick. There it says it right there. He did support slavery, so he was pretty safe to say that Mr. Fillmore here is pretty racist. During Fillmore's presidency, the Missouri Compromise was passed and signed into law by him, including the Fugitive Slave Act. He signed that into law too. He's probably even more racist than we thought he was. Yeah, and he, of course, enforced the Fugitive Slave Act, which ended up leading to the downfall of the Whig Party. This guy really acted more like a Democrat, it seems. Yeah, so again, just like a lot of other presidents all the way down here, Fillmore really did not do much, and the things he did do were bad, like signing the Fugitive Slave Act, and yeah, I mean, Millard Fillmore for you. With the 38th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Las Vegas Atomics select Donald J. Trump, Republican, New York. Okay, Donald Trump is the pick here. This is not a good pick. I think Trump goes too high. He was projected 42nd, I believe. But this is also the Vegas Atomics. They took Ronald Reagan, so they have now taken probably the two most conservative presidents in the draft. But Donald Trump is not a good selection here. One of the first things Donald Trump did as president was order a travel ban on citizens from a lot of Middle Eastern countries, even though they did not do anything wrong. No one knows why, but we all know that Donald Trump definitely does not like Muslim people. He also ran on building a wall on the border with Mexico. And Donald Trump has not been shy about his opinions on Mexican people, so now we can definitely assert that he does not like Mexican people, nor does he like Muslim people, which is incredibly strange, considering that Muslims and Mexicans make up pretty decent amounts of the United States population, and this is a country built on the values of being a melting pot. Trump also withdrew from the Paris Climate Accords, and he rolled back more than 100 environmental policies. He also withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal. He met with our good friend Kim Jong-un 3 different times to discuss denuclearization, but you can't convince Kim Jong-un. He just does what he wants. So no progress. And not to mention Trump's biggest failure, the COVID-19 pandemic. I think Trump ultimately jumps up to three spots, I think it was. I think he jumps up from his projection because of his stimulus checks, and Trump also did a good job at addressing the vaping epidemic in the United States amongst young people by raising the nicotine age to 21. And then we get to Trump's second biggest blunder is when he lost the election, he completely denied that he lost it, and he said it was fraudulent. This is not a guy I like at this pick. He is a historically bad president. It's kind of embarrassing to let him jump up some spots. Oh, and it seems I have forgotten to explain that Donald Trump's reaction to the COVID-19 pandemic was his biggest blunder because he ignored and just made up lies about the pandemic. He often ignored health officials and Dr. Fauci. He often just sparred with Dr. Fauci, and Donald Trump just, yeah, he didn't react to the pandemic well at all. He called it a hoax, and he encouraged people to drink bleach, pretty much, to rid their bodies of the pandemic. I've been talking for 3.5 minutes now. This is the longest explanation I've given so far, but for a guy who has done so many things wrong, I feel like it's necessary. With the 39th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Chesapeake Tobacco select William Henry Harrison, Whig, Ohio. William Henry Harrison is a special case, and he drops this low because he kind of just died 30 days into office. So he didn't really have a chance to do anything at all. So that's why he has to drop this low. He didn't do anything as president other than die. So there's really no choice other than to pick him this low. However, he doesn't go lower because he didn't have the chance to do anything. So it saves him a little bit from being down with the worst of the, well, he already is down with the worst of the worst, but it does save him a little bit. With the 40th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Chicago Capones select John Tyler, Whig, Virginia. So John Tyler is a very special case. So John Tyler was pretty much a Whig in name only, and he was not expected to ever become president, but William Henry Harrison died, and then he became president. So John Tyler became president, and once he tried to do stuff, he was kicked out of the Whig Party, and his entire cabinet resigned. So, yeah, he wasn't able to do anything at all, pretty much. Whigs, they called him his accidency. Ouch, that's a big burn. But he did have some foreign policy achievements, and he did sign a bill allowing Texas to become a state just before he left office. So Tyler was able to get Texas into the country at least, and we all know we love Texas. So yeah, unlucky man, John Tyler. His accidency, I should say, and that's probably why he is accidentally picked at number 40. I'm so funny. With the 41st pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Lexington Minutemen select Grover Cleveland, second term, Democrat, New York. Okay, so Cleveland, in his being president number 24 version, drops so low for the specific reason of the Panic of 1893. Grover Cleveland had to get J.P. Morgan to bail out the country in the midst of the Panic of 1893. That is incredibly fiscally irresponsible. And, you know, he's the frickin' president of the United States. He's supposed to be one of the most powerful men in the world, the most powerful man in the Western Hemisphere. Yet he had to get a freaking banker to bail out the country. And I think that's the reason he slides down this low.
With the 43rd pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the New York Tweeds select Franklin Pierce, Democrat, New Hampshire.
Picking 21st are the Heimler Bowl runner-ups, the Louisiana Purchases. I think here the choice is clear. William Howard Taft from Ohio. He is simply the best candidate available on the board in my opinion. With the 43rd pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Louisiana Purchases select Andrew Johnson, Republican, Tennessee. Okay, Andrew Johnson's another special case as president. He was not supposed to become president. Lincoln was supposed to finish his 2 terms, and Andrew Johnson was supposed to get out of there and go on his way. Andrew Johnson was also, not really a Republican. He was on the ballot as a Republican, but he really was a Democrat. He was on the ballot as a National Union candidate, which was basically the Republican Party. Anyway, Andrew Johnson assumed presidency after Lincoln was assassinated at Ford's Theater, and soon thereafter decided to ignore Lincoln's plan of Reconstruction and make his own. Johnson also opposed the 14th Amendment, which gave citizenship to all people born in the United States, which meant all slaves would have citizenship, and Andrew Johnson did not like that. He did not support the 14th Amendment. In 1866, Andrew Johnson decided to go on a world tour like Taylor Swift and go promote himself. It failed miserably, and the Republicans had huge midterm gains because of it. Andrew Johnson was also the first president to be impeached. Good job, Andrew. And during Johnson's presidency, a lot of black codes began to be passed in the South, and the Republican congressmen of the time passed laws to override these bills, and Andrew Johnson vetoed them, which were then overridden by the congressional Republicans. Basically, to put it shortly, Andrew Johnson would never beat the congressional Republicans. They lived rent-free in his head. And Andrew Johnson's disability to, even though he was the leader of the Republican Party, his disability to work with Republicans, yeah, big no-no. That's why he is ranked the second worst president in U.S. history, and that's why he's drafted 43rd by the Louisiana Purchases. Oh, and not to mention Andrew Johnson's failure to federally guarantee rights for the freedmen. That's also the second big factor in why Andrew Johnson sucks, and he is picked 43rd. That's embarrassing, man. 43rd. And there remains only one candidate on the board, which means the pick is automatically in. With the 44th pick in the 2023 NPL Draft, the Washington Monuments select James Buchanan.
Democrat from Pennsylvania.
Okay, and James Buchanan is the final pick of the 2023 NPL Draft. He is Mr. Irrelevant, and understandably so. James Buchanan is the worst president in U.S. history because when the southern states decided to secede, James Buchanan was like, I'm not going to do anything to stop it, and thus began the Civil War. So, James Buchanan, despite being president of the United States, did not do anything to preserve the United States. Awful, awful, awful pick here by the Washington Monuments, even though it's the only pick they could have made. Awful pick. I hate it. Terrible pick. Poverty franchise. I hate this team. They suck. Don't buy their merch. Awful, 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 awful. Okay, and that concludes the 2023 NPL Draft. The 22 teams of the NPL Draft made some interesting decisions and some great picks and some bad ones. Overall, I think this is one of the best draft classes we have had in a very long time. Do I think they can be better than Cade Cunningham? Absolutely not. He's still the GOAT. But there's some guys who could definitely get top 5 in the new season and lead a new franchise to a Heimler Bowl victory. Thank you, everybody, for watching our broadcast of the 2023 NPL Draft. I'm Aiden Nuttall, and Joe Biden is not here right now. He is doing presidential duties. And yeah, thank you so much for watching the 2023 NPL Draft. We will see you next year.
And they stay there, and they say yeah, and they stay there. Cause all I do is win, win, win. And if you going in, put your hands in the air, make them stay there.
Ludacris going in on the verse, cause I never been defeated and I won't stop now. Keep your hands up, get them in the sky for the homies that ain't making it and my folks locked down. I never went nowhere, what they saying Luda's back. Blame it on that contour, the hood call it Luda Yak. And I'm on this foolish track, so I spit my foolish flow. My hands go up and down, like strippers' booties go. My verses still be serving, tight like a million virgins. Last time on a college remix, now I'm on the original version. Can't never count me out, y'all better count me in. Got 20 bank accounts, accountants count me in. Make millions every year, the South's champion. Cause all I do, all I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get enough. And every time I step up in the building, everybody hands go up. And they stay there, and they say yeah, and they stay there. Cause all I do is win, win, win. And if you going in, put your hands in the air, make them stay there.
Swerving in my low, head on a swivel, you know serving me's a no-no. Clean as a whistle as I pull out in my Rolls Royce. Yellow bone passenger, they see it, they say, oh boy. Tell Cali, back it up, my niggas call me loco. Down for armed trafficking, don't make me pull that fofo. Ask you what you laughing at, represent that mud life. Dirty money, bitch, you better get your mud right. We come together holding hands and holler hood life. We all strapping all black, it's like Bud Light. All we do is win. You riding or what? Cause we riding tonight. Now you riding with me cause you wasn't riding.
All I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get enough. And every time I step up in the building, everybody hands go up. And they stay there, and they say yeah, and they stay there. Cause all I do is win, win, win. And if you going in, put your hands in the air, make them stay there.
Heat in the kitchen, pot on the stove, water getting boiled, dope being sold, Snoopy in the hookie, system overload. I've been running this rap game since I was 20 years old. I hung with the worst of them, bust till I burst them up, floss them up, toss them up, hard away, close them up. Pardon me, I'm bossing up, pressure up, bless you, bro, don't mess with us. We like the U in the 80s. Back to back, set a track, hit the lick, get it back, get the trick, jump the track. Bitch, I want my money back. Time and time again, while I'm sipping on this gin. Al Davis said it best, just win, baby, win.
All I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get enough. And every time I step up in the building, everybody hands go up. And they stay there.